From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. And coming up today, K-State's Dan O'Brien covering his latest price probability outlook for grain sorghum. And Dan will preview the USDA's Small Grains Production Summary and Grain Stocks reports coming out later today. That during his weekly segment on the grain market trends. Also, K-State's Allen Featherstone will look ahead to a special conference for agribusiness leaders to be hosted by K-State at its Olathe campus in mid-October, concentrating on navigating the changes in the agricultural economy. He shares some of the information he'll be presenting there on today's Agribusiness Climate. And later on Kansas agricultural weather, K-State's Mary Knapp. All that and more next on Agriculture Today.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate.
Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
The USDA is poised to release a pair of reports, the Small Grains Summary and the Quarterly Stocks Report. And those, of course, will draw attention from the grain markets, to be sure, but to what extent? That's what we'll bring up first as we visit once more with Dan O'Brien. He is a grain market economist for K-State Research and Extension, as you well know, based in Colby, northwest Kansas. So when you look at these in tandem, these two reports, Dan, the expectations on the trade's part are fairly tame, aren't they?
Yes, tame to bearish, I would say. For the wheat numbers, in essence, they're focusing on there being really no real tangible change in anything. Again, this will be the 2017 Small Grain Summary Report. So we've had USDA estimates for several months coming into this. And if there are any surprises, you would think it probably wouldn't be more than 10, 20 million bushels either way. And again, we're talking about hundreds of millions and billions of bushels. The numbers for folks in Kansas to watch in particular would be, of course, the all-U.S. wheat number, the all-winter wheat number, and in particular, the hard red winter wheat production number. The hard red number, again, average trade guesses, 758 million bushels. They're actually matching exactly the USDA for the 2017 hard red winter wheat crop. So really no expectation that there'd be any major changes from that. That's the average estimate. Guesses from 749 to 765. So just really some small changes around the edge could happen. So, you know, Eric, so when you come into a report like this and the expectations are at low heartbeat at most, then maybe we're ripe for a surprise. But at least as we're looking right now, nobody's really expecting anything as a major change. All winter wheat projected by USDA in the most recent report that it put out at 1.287 billion bushels, just about that same number for the average trade guess. A pretty similar situation for all U.S. wheat, 1.718 billion bushels projected. The last USDA number is about 1.739. So, again, expectations of almost no changes for wheat production, which means if there are any changes, then it would have the opportunity to at least cause some movement. Again, the larger issue, I think, with wheat and with all these grains are our carry-in stocks. And our stocks numbers are large enough that it muffles and mitigates any movement that we're seeing that come out of these fundamental numbers. Of course, there is the grain stocks report that will be also coming out here in a little bit, and the average trade guesses for the corn, grain, sorghum, and soybean numbers will basically be equal to they'll be the September estimates, which would represent the beginning days of the 2017-18 marketing years for those crops. And so I think because they're so directly tied to the WASDE supply-demand numbers, they'll get that much more attention. Projections right now, average trade guess for corn about 2.353 billion bushels. That's not that far off of where the USDA's projections were coming out of that last supply-demand report in early September. Soybean numbers, 338 million bushels. Grain sorghum numbers, about 28 million bushels. So again, all those numbers aren't very far off at all from what the USDA last projected them to be in that September 12th report, and we'll see whatever changes might come. For wheat, average trade estimate for September 1st stocks would be about 2.205 billion bushels. And again, that would be indicative of not a tight supply-demand situation. So anyway, you stand back and you look at all these numbers, and really expectations are for not much impact, no real changes, which means if there are any changes, well, it could have some, at least short to moderate term impact on where we might be going.
And once more, we're anticipating those numbers within the hour out of the USDA. We'll see if the expectations hold fast or whether there are surprises that might gel these markets one way or the other. Dan, you have been in recent weeks putting together your latest balance sheets for the various grains, and with that then your price probability projections. And you just finished up that exercise, if you will, for grain sorghum and the likely outlook on prices there. So how does that read in a general vein?
Well, of course, the USDA has projected for this 2017 crop to be about 371 million bushels. I guess in going back and digging into the Farm Service Agency acreage numbers and looking at how good a predictor they are of acreage figures and consequently of basically the yields and production numbers as well, it looks like, by my estimates anyway, that if we follow historic patterns, that the actual amount of U.S. grain sorghum acreage could be 400,000, 500,000 or so less than what the USDA has projected. And of course, you say up front, well, gosh, that's terrible for the grain sorghum industry. What it actually does, though, is takes whatever yield that they have that they lay on those planted and then harvested acres, and you come in with a smaller number. So some smaller number of supplies and probably of ending stocks. So it would look like to me that in that supply-demand balance, to the degree we have grain sorghum demand holding up decently, probably a little higher prices than what the USDA is projecting. So by my numbers, if the USDA yield is right, it doesn't change from about just under 70 bushels per acre on lower harvested acres, then you've got something like 340 million bushels instead of 371. You run that through supply-demand balance sheet, and you're tightening up down to, 4 or 5% stocks used for grain sorghum. And you might think, well, gosh, there's enough corn around, that won't make any difference. But I would say that if you look at the pace of exports we had just this last week, the week's ending September the 21st, last week we have numbers from the USDA, we had a pretty solid week of grain sorghum exports, about 6.4 million bushels. We need a pace just over 4 to meet the USDA's projection. So, you know what? I guess although on the national feed grain scene we're really, really closely focused on the corn numbers, there's some good things happening under that broader headline on the grain sorghum side in terms of exports. So we'll see how it all works out. And I would say also that if you dig deep enough into the USDA numbers, we do have a fair pace of grain sorghum usage for ethanol production as well. So some decent things happening that are supportive of grain sorghum, and to the degree that they come in, I don't know that grain sorghum, absent what we had happen with the Chinese export demand situation of several years ago, absent something like that happening, I don't know that tightening up of grain sorghum numbers can overcome the feed grain oversupply situation that we're dealing with when you add corn into the mix. But it can make a difference of 5, 10, 15 cents on the basis. So anyway, put those numbers together, and we could see a little bit more of a positive situation for grain sorghum than the USDA is putting out there right now in terms of their September and probably their October, November supply-demand numbers.
But to spell it out, it's very likely in any scenario that grain sorghum will remain right around that $3, $3.10 mark.
Yeah, and the USDA has projected $2.90. So $3, $3.10, $3.15, even $3.20 with stronger than expected demand is a positive. But again, grain sorghum and corn both find themselves in a situation on this go-around, at least as we sit right now. Our break-even prices at decent yields are higher than what the cash prices right now are in the market. There's a chance if we have outstanding yields that we can lower, farm by farm, our cost of production enough to mitigate some of that low price situation. But I guess we'll have to see how each farm comes out, and if they get large yields in this broader market, they come closer to being able to break even or maybe make money in a low price market.
Well, another nugget we find in your weekly notes on the trades, Dan, it's back onto the export side. You were mentioning how well grain sorghum moved here in the last couple of weeks. If you look at the overall wheat export numbers, nothing to get too thrilled about, with the exception, you say, of hard red winter wheat, which is of terrific interest here in Kansas, of course.
Well, yes, the national numbers for actual shipments for the week ending September 21st are about just under 17 million bushels. And again, that's thought to be very negative for the overall wheat market. Again, we need a national pace of about just under 19 to meet the USDA's projections. So that is as it is. But when you look at what's happened in that same week for hard red, we came up with about 9.35 million bushels of exports that week. We need a pace of about 7.6 to meet the USDA's projection of 700 million bushels for hard red movement out of the country. So actually, that's a good thing for hard red. What it brings to the front is the idea that, gosh, if hard red's doing so well, but the national numbers are lagging, then, gosh, these other classes, hard red spring, soft red winter, white, must really be dragging. So right now, again, under the headlines of generally poor U.S. wheat exports, we've got hard red in the last 1 or 2 weeks doing pretty decent. So, in fact, we're at the place where we've got about 31% of the USDA's projection actually shipped. We're about 32, 33% of the way through the marketing year. Have other sales ahead with shipments and sales about 45% of the way through. Again, still at about 32, 33% of the way through the marketing year. Of course, those sales will have to keep coming to keep up that pace. But I guess we shouldn't despise small things.
Right.
And for hard red and for grain sorghum to have had some good weeks of exports, even under this overall larger cloud of pessimism in the grain markets, isn't the bad thing on the Kansas grain market side.
Once more, do have a look at Dan's weekly notes on the grain trades at agmanager.info. Dan, many thanks to you.
Thanks, Eric. Take care.
Dan O'Brien from his office in Colby. He is a grain market economist, K-State Research and Extension, along with us every week here on Agriculture Today.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
We're back now on This Agriculture Today. Mike Side now is the head of the Department of Agricultural Economics here at K-State. Allen Featherstone, and primarily Allen is going to inform us of a special program that's coming up in mid-October at K-State's Olathe campus in Johnson County. This is being sponsored by the Masters in Agribusiness program out of K-State, and it is promoting the theme of leading through change. Allen, this is a brand new undertaking. Tell us about it.
Yeah, this is an opportunity to essentially interact with K-State Olathe. We're also being supported by the Kansas City Agribusiness Council and just have an opportunity to, one, kick off the 20th anniversary of the Master of Agribusiness program and to do it with a professional development activity. One of the main speakers that we have is Bruce Tulgan. He is with Rainmaker Thinking, but essentially he's going to do a half-day workshop. Bruce has written numerous books, one of which is Not Everyone Deserves a Trophy, which is intriguing in itself with the title. But essentially, he is probably one of the leading experts in the country working with the millennial generation and the younger generations. And one of his comments is that they will probably be the most productive generation. But also one of his comments is that they will be one of the more difficult generations to maybe motivate, think about how they think differently than previous generations in the business world.
And he's attuning this message to the agribusiness audience. That's who you're reaching out to with this entire program, actually, right?
Absolutely. In terms of it is for the agribusiness audience, and he will be very interactive. And one of the things that I think has really helped his reputation is just the fact that he does address questions from the audience. And so sometimes individuals have the tendency maybe to speak around questions, but Bruce will answer those questions that the audience has head on. And so he's very thought-provoking and very interactive with regards to the style of presentation.
So again, Bruce Tolgan will be one of the keynoters for this two-day conference, which is, by the way, October the 19th and the 20th at K-State's Olathe campus. But there's much more to this. Allen, we want to tap you a bit for what you'll be sharing on today's agribusiness climate. And we understand the general unsettledness, if you will, of the agricultural economy currently. Are you going to be playing on that theme? What?
Certainly there will be some discussion with regards to the current climate in the agricultural and agribusiness sector. In some respects, there's just a lot of uncertainty with regards to where the sector is going. The farm community continues to struggle. In terms of if you look at the earnings of companies that are involved in the agribusiness sector, I'm sure they're not what the CEOs of those companies would like. Certainly there's issues with regards to hiring. It appears that with the struggles we have in the agricultural economy, they may be taking a little bit different track than they have previously. The last major recession in the agricultural economy, they just stopped hiring at the undergraduate level. It appears now that they're continuing to hire at the undergraduate level and maybe offering more buyouts. And so in some respects, even how the agribusiness companies are managing these tightening times is a little bit different than the past. In terms of thinking about the farm economy, looking at the Kansas Farm Management records, essentially 22% of the farms in the Kansas Farm Management Association had a negative net income in both 2015 and 2016. At the other side, 44% had a positive net farm income in both those years. And so, again, there is a certain segment of the sector that's doing probably okay, and then there's a sector that is really struggling, and so it just has a lot of implications in terms of where we might be in 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
And so you're hoping in your presentation to parse out those things that might help the ag economy get on more of an even keel, if nothing else.
Yeah, no, certainly that's one of the major things, and again, using the Kansas Farm Management information, and I think most of the individuals that are familiar with the agricultural sector, especially the crop side, if you look at, for example, 2016, the wheat enterprise revenue didn't basically met variable costs, but essentially farmers were losing, according to the farm management information, about $70 per acre. Soybeans were making about $70 per acre, and so it's very crop-specific, very location-specific within Kansas with regards to the ability to diversify and choose alternative crops and different production systems.
So you'll be lending understanding of where we are, where we may be headed with today's economy and the agribusiness scene. Do want to mention at least one more of the presentations that will take place at this conference. And this is a revival, if you will, of point-counterpoint duo from years past. They will take on agricultural policy and two quite familiar names, right?
Yes, we are pleased to have Barry Flinchbaugh from Kansas State and Mark Edelman from Iowa State, basically looking at policy and interacting that with the whole leaders and preparing for change. And again, we are going to use the point-counterpoint type framework, and so I think it'll be a good opportunity to at least see what is on the minds of Barry and Mark as we enter the Farm Bill discussion.
And if you've never seen the farm policy banter between Barry Flinchbaugh and Mark Edelman, it is insightful, no question, and oftentimes spirited, so it's always well worth the price of admission. That'll take place the morning of Friday, October the 20th, the second day of this conference. But there's much more to it. There's a session on actually unmanned aerial systems and where they would factor into agribusiness, mergers and acquisitions, some very pointed topics there, right?
Yes, there really is. And another one I think is very much in the limelight with the Equifax situation is basically data risk. And really thinking through those issues with regards to even cellular phone technology and just what you're putting out there for people to pick up. And so certainly within the agricultural sector, that's a very important topic in terms of managing your data and making sure that it's secured in the manner that you would choose to have it secured.
Well, it's the Leading Through Change Conference, being hosted at K-State's Olathe campus October the 19th and the 20th. Registration in advance is quite likely required here, is it not, Alan?
Yes. If you register by the end of Monday, you'll get the early bird fee, and then you can register all the way up into the conference, and we would certainly take registrations at the door on the 19th, 20th. Also, for example, there is the opportunity to just do one day if that's all that can fit in your schedule. And so, again, you'll want to take a look at the MAB website, mab.kstate.edu. And if you'd rather search for us on Facebook, I think the same information is on the MAB Facebook page.
Once more, that is at mab.k-state.edu if you have an interest in registering for this unique conference coming up in mid-October. Alan, before we let you go, this has been put on in part, as you said, in recognition of the Masters in Agribusiness program's 20th anniversary this very year. And reflecting on that, this has been a successful endeavor, to be sure.
Absolutely. In terms of 20 years ago when we started the MAB program, certainly we had no idea in terms of the potential benefits. But over the years, we've educated more than 500 individuals from about 40 states in the U.S. and about 35 countries abroad. And so it really has given the students that come to Kansas State via distance a broad picture with regards to the global food and agricultural chain.
And it's facilitated off campus by and large, so it's been very handy for folks to take part, right?
Yes, it is a distance program. They do come to campus for 4 weeks over the 2-year program, 1 week at a time, but it has developed lifelong relationships among individuals within the sector, and certainly we would like to think that it's helped boost many careers.
And it is very much still open for business, the Masters in Agribusiness program at K-State through distance learning. You can find out more about it, obviously, as well at mab.k-state.edu. Alan, for the preview of this special conference upcoming, many thanks, and we wish you the best with it.
Thanks, Eric.
He's the head of the Department of Agricultural Economics at K-State, Allen Featherstone. Once more, this conference will be hosted by the K-State Olathe campus in Johnson County on October the 19th and the 20th. That is a Thursday, Friday, at that site. Leading Through Change is the theme, and it's a great program they put together for this occasion. Be sure to take it in if at all possible, particularly those of you in agribusiness leadership positions. Go to mab.k-state.edu for the complete details and for registration. Agriculture Today will return in a few moments with today's agricultural news headlines, this week's edition of the Kansas Wheat Scoop with Jordan Hildebrand, and again on Kansas agricultural weather, K-State's Mary Knapp. Still ahead here on the K-State Radio Network.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggled to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State research and extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
You're tuned in to the K-State Radio Network and Agriculture Today. Welcome back. Eric Atkinson here. To today's agricultural news headlines for you now. These courtesy in part of DTN. Kansas Attorney General Derek Schmidt has filed comments in support of the Environmental Protection Agency's proposal to withdraw the Waters of the U.S. rule, which has been blocked by federal court orders since October of 2015. Schmidt, along with the attorneys general of 24 other states, submitted the comment letter in support of the EPA's proposal to rescind the 2015 definition of Waters of the U.S., or the WOTUS rule, and to maintain the current regulatory system rather than imposing a new one. Quoting Schmidt in his comments, it's important the EPA does this the right way, noting that even technical errors by the EPA in rescinding WOTUS could spur continued or future litigation. Kansas is one of the states that filed the lawsuit that blocked the WOTUS rule from taking effect nationwide. Last December, Schmidt and a bipartisan group of 24 state attorneys general and 2 other state officials had urged the incoming Trump administration to rescind the WOTUS rule. This week's filing focuses on the details of how the administration proposes to do so. Now, according to the comments in the letter that was sent to EPA, the WOTUS rule would have extended the EPA and Army Corps of Engineers regulatory reach into small waterways, ditches, and ponds on Kansas farms, ranch, and land developments. It went on to say the rule would have significant consequences for homeowners, farmers, and other entities by forcing them to navigate a complex federal bureaucracy and to obtain costly permits in order to perform everyday tasks such as digging ditches, building fences, or applying fertilizers. Conservation groups are urging Congress to increase funding in the 2018 Farm Bill and to strengthen current conservation efforts to ensure that farmers, ranchers, and foresters can effectively access those programs. More than 20 organizations that contributed input were listed as supporters. The consensus document asks for a large increase in funding for conservation programs, but supporters make it clear they do not want these funds to come at the expense of other programs in the Farm Bill. The set of recommendations highlight a number of programs with detailed lists of necessary changes and several conservation provisions that also need changes. Although conservation advocates are asking to increase funding in programs, they are also looking to change the requirements for some. The new USDA report on hog and pig inventories, released yesterday, shows that producers are continuing to ramp up pork production to record levels. Here's a closer look from the USDA's Gary Crawford.
For those who make their living raising hogs and producing pork,
there is a degree of optimism in the industry.
And USDA livestock analyst J.L. Shagam says it shows in Thursday's quarterly hogs and pigs report. First, the inventory of all hogs and pigs September 1st, 73.5 million head, up 2% from 1 year ago, a new quarterly record, making 3 straight quarters of record inventories. Optimism showing in continued expansion. Producers farrowed 2% more sows this summer than last year, with intentions to expand farrowings in both the fall and winter quarters, and why not?
Through August, returns to producers have been positive. Returns for packers have also been positive.
Now, yes, large supplies are pushing hog prices down a bit, but Shagam says,
I don't think that we're going to be looking at a price collapse.
Not a big one anyway, not with 2 new big packing plants having just opened their doors this month.
As these new packing plants ramp up production, they're going to need those hogs, and that could be price supportive going forward.
Average hog prices now about $37 a hundredweight, down from $40 this time a year ago. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
And the U.S. could lift its ban on imports of fresh beef from Brazil in October. That's according to a statement from the Brazilian Agriculture Ministry. We received information that processed beef was cleared, according to Agriculture Minister Blero Maggi. In his statement, he says that they hope that very soon they'll be able to clear fresh beef. That statement noted that the ban would end after the U.S. finishes its current evaluation of information provided by Brazil on questions raised by U.S. veterinary experts that visited Brazil earlier this month. Next up on Agriculture Today, this week's Kansas Wheat Scoop. And awaiting with that is Jordan Hildebrand. Jordan?
U.S. Wheat Associates and the National Association of Wheat Growers welcome the decision by the Trump administration to make sure China is living up to its commitments on wheat trade. In response to action by the administration, the World Trade Organization Dispute Settlement Body has established a panel to rule on a complaint filed in December 2016 by the United States Trade Representative regarding China's administration of its tariff rate quotas for wheat and other agricultural products. U.S. Wheat and NOG are very pleased with the Trump administration's aggressive use of the WTO dispute settlement mechanism on behalf of wheat farmers. This is the second panel established at the WTO under the Trump administration to defend the interests of wheat farmers. The first will examine whether China's market price support programs for wheat, corn, and rice violate its trade commitments. According to a 2016 Iowa State University study sponsored by U.S. Wheat, China's market price support programs cost U.S. wheat farmers between $650 and $700 million annually in lost revenue by preempting export opportunities and suppressing global prices. China also has a WTO commitment for an annual tariff rate quota of 9.64 million metric tons of imported wheat. The panel established September 22, 2017, in the tariff rate quota case will review evidence that China has not administered this tariff rate quota in a transparent, predictable, and fair manner as required by its WTO obligations. The result is that China's tariff rate quota administration unfairly impedes wheat export opportunities for U.S. wheat farmers, as well as farmers from Canada, Australia, and other wheat exporting countries, to the detriment of Chinese consumers. NOG President David Shim, a wheat grower from Sharon Springs, Kansas, said, "It is very encouraging to see the Trump administration defend farmers against governments that say to the world that they will live up to their commitments, but then scheme to disregard the rules we all need to ensure global trade is conducted freely and fairly. Wheat growers will always stand up and applaud when the administration expands, improves, and enforces trade agreements on behalf of farmers." U.S. Wheat Chairman Mike Miller, a wheat farmer from Ritzville, Washington, said, "Trade enforcement is crucial for building confidence in existing and new trade agreements. The Trump administration's actions should send a signal that strong and enforceable trade rules are vital to the United States and U.S. farmers specifically. To read more about the dispute panel established in the tariff rate quota case, please visit the U.S. Wheat website at www.uswheat.org. For more information on the National Association of Wheat Growers, please visit www.wheatworld.org. For more information about U.S. Wheat, please visit their website at www.uswheat.org. For Kansas Wheat, this is Jordan Hildebrand.
Thanks, Jordan. You're listening to Agriculture Today. Next up, Mary Knapp on Kansas agricultural weather here on the K-State Radio Network. Legal and financial concerns surround the day-to-day management of the agricultural industry. Producers, ag creditors, and USDA agencies rely on Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. If you've received an adverse decision from the USDA or have an ag credit concern, call today, 800-321-3276, or visit us online, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services, exploring options, generating solutions. Up for you now on Agriculture Today, the very latest on Kansas agricultural weather. It's good to have back Mary Knapp, Research and Extension Climatologist at K-State, and moisture this past week. That's the headliner, Mary, and more than substantial rainfall in a lot of parts of Kansas.
Right. We actually had some really good rain in the western parts of the state, and that was mostly all of what we've gotten for September. And so it was a very nice end to the month for the western half of the state, pretty much. In southwestern Kansas, they saw an average of 2.31 inches for the month. And again, most of that came in this last week. What was very nice about this particular rain event is that while there were some embedded heavy thunderstorms A lot of it fell over an extended period of time, which allowed for penetration for some soaking and minimized the amount of runoff that was occurring with it. Again, didn't completely eliminate it. Some places had 4+ inches, and there was some flooding associated with it. But overall, a very welcome rain event to get some soil moisture in place for those fall-planted crops.
Western and parts of central Kansas, the greatest beneficiaries. There was rain elsewhere, but not nearly to the same extent.
Right. As you go further east, the amounts dropped off significantly. Here in the Manhattan area, we had a little bit less than a half an inch for the event compared to, again, 4+ inches in places. So not nearly so positive. So when we look at the month as a whole, we're looking at decreasing percent of normal from west to east. All of the western divisions were above normal for the month to date. Well, actually, for the month as a whole, we only have 2 more days to get that into the totals. But the Southwest, not surprisingly, it has the greatest departure. They're 173% of normal for the month of September. The Southeast, on the other hand, 40% of normal.
In that area of the state, not accustomed to that dryness.
Well, again, they need a lot more moisture to reach normal, but getting only 40% of normal in September isn't helping keep that soil profile filled. They've got a lot of clay pan areas there, so that surface can dry out pretty quickly, and the moisture down below the clay pan isn't going to be doing anything. Not necessarily totally negative, because they have better chances as we move into October and November. In western parts of the state, the average precipitation drops off very significantly as we go into our later part of the fall, whereas we don't have quite that distribution difference as you go into the eastern areas, so there's more chance to make it up.
On the temperature side, despite the cool-off in recent days, September was warmer than normal.
Yes, it was. Again, we have followed the same pattern. It's the warmest temperatures, warmest departures were in the eastern third of the state, and the closest to normal were in the west. And again, not surprisingly, Southwest with the rainier pattern was also closer to their average temperature. They were only about 0.7 of a degree warmer than they would typically be. Northwest was about a degree warmer. In contrast, Northeast was 3.2 degrees warmer than they would be on average. So again, dry and warm in the east and wet and pretty seasonal in the west is basically the story. And we did see the highest temperatures in the west. They had 102 in northwest and in north central, but they also had the coolest reading. Northwest got down to 36 already, and there are some reports of maybe as cool as 32 at Brewster. So again, big swings, which are typical again in the western divisions. Not so much of a swing, and you get in the east at 98 for the warmest temperature in the southeastern division and 43 for the low.
Turning then to the outlook for the week immediately ahead, pretty seasonal as temperatures go anyway.
Right. Basically expecting seasonal temperatures for most of the state, a slight tilt towards warmer than normal conditions in the west. But again, keep in mind the 74 degrees that we see in the eastern part of the state may be a little bit cooler than normal, but out west it will be a little bit warmer than you would typically see as you start October.
And moisture chances the next few days, they are there. May not be overwhelming, but they're in the forecast.
Right. And again, the biggest chances tend to be in the west. They've got about a 30% chance for some scattered throughout the weekend. That will move eastward as we move into Monday and Tuesday, a little bit better chance. Another chance, again, as we get towards the end of next week. And when we look at the quantitative precip forecast, which is a gauge of how much that system might deliver in the form of moisture, It looks like the best chances may be in our north central division. This system is going to slide more across Nebraska and South Dakota, and that north central region has a better chance of accumulating some substantial amounts, maybe as much as 3 inches. And that's an area that has been below average for the season. So getting some substantial moisture there will help erase some of the drought that is still in the area.
And October, we'll check in this weekend. So the outlook for the month there suggests what?
It's basically neutral. There is, again, much like we saw with our weekly outlook, a tilt towards warmer than normal temperatures. The official outlook for the period is for neutral on the precip in the western half of the state, but a tilt towards dry in the east. And again, given the fact that the eastern part still has to make a lot more moisture to reach normal than the west, that's not surprising.
Drier than normal doesn't mean no rain.
Exactly. It could very well mean that we get 80 or 90% of our normal, and if it comes in reasonable amounts, that could still allow for a window for harvest, but still have sufficient moisture for the planting of those fall crops.
Well, in any event, the recent coolness has reminded us that fall is here, and comfortably so folks enjoy that.
It's certainly going to be very nice football weather for the weekend.
You bet. Mary, as always, thanks.
Thanks, Eric.
She is along with us each Friday to discuss what's going on in Kansas agricultural weather. Research and Extension climatologist here at K-State, Mary Knapp, rounding out our Friday edition. And again, thanks to you for tuning in. Please be back with us here this same time on Monday, won't you? Until then, Eric Atkinson bidding you a good weekend for Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.